Welcome to Chapter 1 of RSTO 2301, Principles of Food and Beverage Cost Control, where we are going to discuss the importance of cost. In this particular video, we are going to identify what cost is, the manager's role in controlling our cost, different types of costs that restaurants and food service operations incur, and then as well as looking at the importance of controlling our prime cost. All right, so our relationship between cost and profitability. If we can keep our costs low while maintaining the same level of revenue and sales, then our profit will go up. And we can look at that using this formula. Profit, I'm also going to do loss, equals revenue minus our expenses. Okay, now revenue can also be sales. Expenses can also be costs. Okay, and so if our revenue stays the same, let's say we have, I don't know, $100,000 in sales. And our expenses for that particular period were $20,000. Well, if we subtract those two numbers, then obviously we'll get $80,000. Okay, if we are looking at trying to control our expenses, and let's say the second period that we're looking at, we did the same number of sales, so $100,000, but we were actually able to decrease our expenses by $3,000. So we only spent $17,000 during that same period, and so ultimately our profit would be $83,000. Okay, so you can see as we control our costs, then our profit will also increase. So your role as a future manager in controlling cost is that you want to make sure that you set what the expectations are, you monitor the performance, and then you assess where things need to change, okay, and you give some feedback. So let me give you an example about a time when my manager was monitoring a situation. When I was working at TGI Fridays, my trainer told me that sometimes if I got this vibe that the people I was waiting on were really cool, that I could not charge them for drinks, their non-alcoholic beverages, and then they would add that to their tip at the end of the meal. And so I didn't do that very often. And also, honestly, I didn't really follow that suggestion anyways, but there were just sometimes when I would forget to put drinks on a check, or if my friends came in, I wouldn't put drinks on a check. And so my manager, Kristen, was monitoring the situation, and she would pull up the system and say, oh, there's 4 drinks on table 42, and I noticed that David doesn't have any drinks on the check in table 42 on the system. And so she would just very politely come over to me and say, hey, David, I noticed that there's drinks on table 42 and they're not in the system yet, so make sure you get those rung up before you drop the check. And so that told me that she really was paying attention. Now, if Kristen was making mental notes at the end of the shift, if she would go back to look at table 42's check, and if I didn't have drinks on there, then that would be her time to correct that action. But you have to be present as a manager. You can't just sit in the back office and think that everything is going to work perfectly. You have to be visible. People have to know that you are present and observing to make sure that people are following what needs to happen. So we also, as a manager, have to decide, how can we implement some kind of cost saving, and what is the benefit of doing so? And so here we have an establishment that serves an average 165 meals per day. They're open 360 days a year. And so what we want to look at is what is the potential cost savings if we can decrease our cost by a certain amount, okay? And so we take 165 meals, we multiply that by 360 days, and that gives us 59,400 meals that we served throughout the whole year, okay? Well, if a manager wants to decrease that cost by 15 cents, so we're going to multiply by 15 cents per meal, okay? Now that gives us a total cost savings of $8,910, okay? That's a pretty significant savings just by decreasing the cost by 15 cents. That could be revising the menu, that could make sure that we are actually charging for beverages when the beverages are served. There's lots of different ways that we can maybe consider doing that. So what if we could do it by an additional 10 cents, okay? And so we already have the math there. Let's do 59,400 meals times 0.25, so 25 cents. That gives us a total savings of $14,850. That is a significant savings if we can decrease the cost by 25 cents. Now, does that mean we want to decrease the cost just for the sake of decreasing the cost? Absolutely not. We want to make sure that the quality is still going to be there, so that the people and our guests will still purchase those particular meals, those particular items. There we go. All right, so we have a few different types of costs. The first one is our fixed. Our fixed costs do not change. It doesn't matter if we have one person walk in the door or 1,000 people walk in the door. We still need to pay our managers their salary. We still need to pay the rent. So our variable costs, they changed based on how busy we are. So our business volume. If we're really busy, then we need to spend more money on ingredients to prepare the food. If we are really slow, then we might need to start sending people home so we don't spend as much on our labor. And so we do have some variable costs that have some attributes of both fixed and variable. That's why it's called semi-variable. We'll talk about that in just a moment. We also have another category called controllable and non-controllable. So let's take a look at a couple of different types of costs and put them into categories. So here, with this first chart of fixed cost, the top one shows that as our sales is increasing and decreasing, as our sales fluctuate, our fixed costs remain the same, okay? Our fixed cost remains the same at 40. Now that is going to include things like our salaries and our rent on our building, and then we move down to our variable costs. And with our variable costs, the costs directly move in the same proportion as the sales. So the busier we are, the more money we spend on ingredients. The slower we are, the lower our costs are going to be. So this is our food and beverage costs. This is also what's called our wages. Okay, so wages are our hourly employees. This is where our semi-variable costs come into play. So semi-variable is included what we call labor, because labor has both salaries and our wages. Okay. So our salary and our wages make up our labor costs, and that's why it's semi-variable, because it has both fixed and variable attributes. Now let's talk about controllable costs and non-controllable costs. So our salaries and rent are non-controllable, because we can't just simply change that. We can't call up our landlord and say, hey, I need you to drop my rent by $1,000 a month. We can't do that because they're non-controllable. But the controllable costs are our food and beverage and our wages. Those are our big controllable costs where we can really have an impact. So because our food and beverage and our labor, as far as wages are concerned, are considered a controllable cost, we're going to put those three together in a category called prime costs. They're our most controllable. If we notice as a manager that our prime costs are skyrocketing, then that is one area that we can look to try to control the loss of any profit. We often look at our costs as a percentage of our total sales. And so I'm going to give you two different formulas. The first formula is going to be percent equals the part over the whole. Okay, the part of the whole. That's how we look at our percentages. And then we multiply that number by 100. So the other thing I want to give you is this wonderful tool of a triangle. Okay, I want you to make sure you write this triangle down: cost, percent, sales. Okay, this middle line that goes across the triangle is going to act like a division sign. Okay, and then the line that goes vertically is going to act like a multiplication line. We will use this tool quite a bit, and hopefully you'll get to a point where you don't need to use this tool. But we will use it in the meantime until you get comfortable. The thing that I want to talk about as our prime cost as a percentage, typically we do not want our food and beverage, to exceed 33%. So we're looking at a 30 to 33% food cost. Our labor is also one of the larger ones, and so we're looking at no more than 35%. Okay, so what that means is that our prime cost should not exceed 68% of our sales. We'll go into more detail about what that means in a future video.